Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we are going to be doing a pseudo-historical playthrough of crewed spaceflight. I don't really know what the title of this series is going to be yet. I'm still workshopping that one, but let's hop over to display capture and we're going to go over real quick what this is intended to be. A, it's not intended to be completely accurate. We're just hitting the highlights, and the crafts will be inspired by historical crafts, but they will not be completely accurate since I don't believe it's possible to do that within the constraints of KSP, due to part limitations, due to different aerodynamics models from reality, and other things like that. This may have a bit of a NASA focus due to difficulty researching CCCP achievements, since I don't speak Russian, and the Soviets, they were a wee bit secretive about some of this stuff, so it can be hard to find some information on the Soviet space program. But we'll be trying to be doing both. So here's the series constraints. We're not allowed to do launches except those listed here, although we can retry launches if we fail them. For each successful launch, we earn 250,000. For each successful category completion, we earn 500,000. We're allowed to get only what science we can get on these missions, although I do want to add in, we start with 70 science, because that's what you need to unlock the Sputnik for the Sputnik 1 first flight here. Contracts are fully disallowed. So we're going to be starting with the beginning with Sputnik 1, and that's actually going to earn us 750,000, which is going to be a very good leg up here. But honestly, finances aren't really the point behind this. It just adds a little bit of failure constraints, right? So that's the idea here. We're going to be placing the first satellite into orbit, launching the space race. And we're going to start with this, even though this is not crewed, and we're focusing on crewed spaceflight here. This is still incredibly important, because that is what started the space race. So as you can see here, I've got goals lined out for the early orbital steps, and I've got more categories down here that will be researched and fleshed out like the early orbital steps later on. I just haven't had time to get to these just yet. But we'll get to those. And again, I'm not planning for this to be completely historically accurate. This is more an entertainment series than a documentary series. But hopefully we'll learn a few things along the way as well. So let's hop over into KSP and get started on this. We're going to hit that start game button. We're going to start new, and I've already put in crew recreation here and created a flag for us. So we're just going to hop straight on in career mode. Magnificent. So once this loads in, we're going to grab our starting technologies, and the Sputnik craft is going to be interesting to launch. I've already taken a look at what this is going to look like with the tech we'll have available, and it's not going to be pretty. I can tell you that right now. So here's what we'll have to start with. We're going to have that initial 70 starting science, which is all we get to unlock the Sputnik over here. So we need this Engineering 101, we need survivability, we need basic science, and we can grab basic rocketry. And that's all we've got. That's all we can take for now. So we're going to leave the facility. We're going to hop into the VAB. And the question is, what is this craft going to look like? Well, unfortunately, I've done some research on what the Vostok 1, or not Vostok 1, what the what the Sputnik 1 craft looked like. And we can't build that. Not with our current technology, and not with the constraints of KSP as it exists right now. I think we would need modded parts. So we're not going to try to make the launch vehicle for Sputnik 1 be anywhere related to the actual craft. I will toss up on the screen here in just a moment. Let me pull up what the craft actually looked like. It was this bad boy. This is an ICBM that they reused, and yeah, right now, we don't really have the capability to create this in KSP. Now, am I saying it's impossible? No, absolutely not. But with the tech that we have at this moment unlocked in KSP, we absolutely cannot do that. So just know that they used a craft like this one, and not like the one that we're going to have. It had a fairing, it has all this fancy nonsense going on. It is liquid fueled, so there is that. We will not be solid fueling this. But the Sputnik itself, basically all we need is some communitrons here. So I would put those like about there, and then we would rotate these communitrons. So they would be angled about like this, and then we would just move them inward a little bit. I'm going to turn snap off for that. And I want this to be in local units because I want to move these inward a bit. So let me grab that and move it in like so. Fantastic. And we'll move it back into place mode. And there we go. That's the Sputnik craft. These were actually more metallic, but that's fine for right now. So that's the Sputnik craft, and now we need to try to put it in orbit. With the tech that we have right now, that's going to be exciting for a couple of reasons. One, the Sputnik does not have SAS. Two, there's no power, no solar panels or anything. Three, we don't have any control surfaces available. So this is going to be really interesting. We're going to need a decoupler here for sure, a TD12 decoupler. And then we're going to put in a bunch of these T100 fuel tanks. This is 8 of them. I'm going to put in like 16. That should be way more than enough fuel. There's a really light payload, but to be honest, I think that the Soviets massively over-engineered their rocket for their payload. I suspect they could have used a wee bit smaller of a rocket than a 30-meter tall rocket. I mean, keep in mind, this thing is 12.7 meters tall. That said, real world and KSP are very different. So I'm not going to try to judge them on that regard. But this thing is going to have aerodynamics issues. Now, I'm going to put it out on the pad. This is going to be revertible. We can revert this back. I want to feel out how the aerodynamics are going to go. I have a feeling we're going to have some tumble problems. So let's put this through a quick simulation here. We will revert this, I guess, unless it goes perfectly, but I highly doubt that that's going to be the case. We cannot turn SAS on, but we can just lift right on off the pad. We've got lots of delta V for this, which should be fairly accurate. I'm keeping an eye on our heading here. I'm not putting any inputs in. We have no SAS on, obviously. We're automatically wanting to head over towards the 90-degree marker, which is kind of ideal-ish. We're drifting northward. I'm going to try to correct that. Ooh, okay. This is rough without SAS. And without control surfaces as well. We also need to keep in mind we have no react... Ooh, that's a big tumble. Okay. We have no reaction wheel in this thing. So let's revert this thing back. We'll head back to the vehicle assembly. We have no reaction wheel, so we can't turn it without having the engine burning. This has a reaction wheel, right? It does. Do we have access to an independent reaction wheel? No. We also don't have access to any command and control, which is what they would have actually used in this era. So we don't have access to any of that. As far as fins go, all we have is a basic fin. How many parts do we have available? 7? So we could do like 6 of these. Something like this, and just hope to go up straight. I'm still in the testing the aerodynamic stage. So we're still going to be able to revert this back if it goes badly, and I kind of expect it to go badly. Without those being control surfaces, steering is going to be very complicated for us, especially as we are attempting to get into orbit. This is going to be complicated with the level of tech we have right now. Which, to be clear, when the Soviets put Sputnik into orbit, it was a huge achievement. Absolutely. Although they didn't have quite the same problems that we're facing right now. So I'm trying to make it so that we're not flying retrograde here. That would be for the best. But I definitely don't want to turn too far over. Otherwise, aerodynamics are just going to flip us. This is way more stable, and we don't have to be in a perfectly equatorial orbit, right? So I'm just trying to get us up relatively straight here, holding in the prograde marker as best we can. Yikes. I switched over to apoapsis here and lost attitude because I wasn't paying attention for half a second. Okay, well, we'll have to revert this one. The attitude control is really tough at this point. No doubt about that. One thing I wouldn't mind doing, even though we're not really going to have power for it. Actually, we could put some rechargeable battery banks on here. We have space for one part. We could definitely put a rechargeable battery bank on here. That would be jettisoned. What I would like to do is I would like to get a couple of science parts on here. So we would have just a thermometer and a mystery goo containment unit for now. Now, we're going to be over our part limit. We can drop 2 fuel tanks. We have plenty of fuel to get into space without that. And I would like to just put that out on the pad, and we're going to collect the science for it. And we'll get this science moved back as well. The real question is, how are we going to get this thing up into orbit without control surfaces? I think it's possible. It's going to be difficult, though. No doubt about that. It requires utmost concentration to get this thing done. So we're going to grab our mystery goo our observation and our thermometer data here. And then we're going to recover this vessel. And we're going to get what science we can out of that. That's part 1. That's not a launch. And this is also part of the Sputnik program that we're on here. But we're going to have a number of failures here, I suspect. This is going to be really complicated. So let's grab this data. That's absolutely great. And let's put this thing back out on the pad now. How much money do we have anyway? We've got like 28,000. Hilarious. Yeah, one of our first experiments at home. Okay, so we're going to launch this thing again, except I kind of want to remove these parts now. We got the science that we were going to get, and we could certainly put on 3 more fuel tanks. I don't know that that helps our aerodynamics. Let's put this out here and run a quick simulation and see how we can do just going relatively straight up. Another question I have is, are we pushing through the atmosphere too quickly and creating too many aerodynamic stresses on our vehicle? That is a potential thing. So I want to maybe back off our thrust to weight ratio here. Oh, we're at 1.53. No, that should be relatively fine. Yeah. So we're just going to sit here for the time being, and we'll see how this goes. I'm hopping us over into maneuver mode, and I want to make sure that we're going out this direction, right? We absolutely want to make sure of that. Okay. This is going to be very interesting. I have no idea how this is going to go, but so far it's going quite well, actually. I think we're drifting a little bit upwards, so I'm trying to correct for that. Okay. Now we're drifting downwards. I'm correcting for that as well. Cool. And we're going to be angling, I think, for like a 100-kilometer orbit here. Okay. 700 meters per second. This is going so much better. I think it was that we had too much thrust to weight, and we couldn't handle it. So for right now, I'm just heading on over to the horizon. I see that we're at 100 kilometers. And we're just pushing out here. Really, we should be cutting throttle and coasting, but without reaction wheels, I don't feel like we can hold attitude and do that. So we're just going to continue pushing this out. It's a lot, no doubt about that. But I want to get us up into space here. I guess we're pushing for like a 200-kilometer orbit. So I'm going to cut the throttle here. And we can't do maneuvers, but what we can do is we can tumble around and let this go for a full tumble, which is exactly what we'll do. And then we can push ourselves up into orbit. This is actually kind of working. I'm actually shocked. We've got 700 meters per second left here. I think that we need to give it another tumble here. Let's let this tumble right on around. And then we'll start burning prograde once we make our way over. We don't really care about what orbit we get in. We just want an orbit here. With this tech, I'm perfectly happy with that. So we've launched our first vessel, broken a bunch of records and such. Okay. So I'm giving us a tiny bit of thrust here. Right at this horizon mark. Have we overshot our apoapsis too much? Perhaps. Let's head over towards the apoapsis here. We're too low right now, for sure, to burn this efficiently. We're currently at 300. It's difficult with the level of tech that we have, for sure. So let's head over to around like 280. Okay. I'm going to do a very gentle burn to get us turning. And now I'm cutting the throttle. And once we hit the horizon, we're just going to do a full burn. Beautiful. We're in orbit. Okay, we've got 39 meters per second to go. I'm just going to burn the last of that. It's a wacky orbit, but we'll do that. We're now going to decouple this. Phenomenal. And we're just going to, if I can grab the antenna. There we go. We'll extend our antennas. We should probably do that with all of them. And there we go. That was quite challenging, actually, but we fully expect that to be challenging. And here we are, a Sputnik floating around. Yeah, these are not great apoapsis and periapsis numbers. What were the real apoapsis and periapsis numbers? That is something I want to check here. I'm looking. Perigee was 215 and apogee was 939. So we actually did better than the Soviets did there. Inclination of 65.1 is what the Soviets had, and we don't actually have access to that information. So I'm not sure what our inclination is, but our inclination, it's not perfect. But it's certainly not 65 degrees. That said, the Soviets definitely didn't launch from an equatorial launch site. So, I mean, in terms of the apoapsis periapsis, their periapsis was a little lower than ours, but their apoapsis was almost double ours. So they were a lot more elliptical than we were. Cool. Overall, I'm relatively pleased with that. And we did manage to get this thing into space with a minimum of fuss. I'm actually shocked that it worked with that one, but I really think that our aerodynamics issues were actually a too high of thrust to weight issue, and adding in those 3 additional fuel tanks fixed the thrust to weight issue. I'm pretty sure that's what ended up happening. So we got our world first milestone of entering orbit, but also, of course, we can now scratch off the beginning. So that's done, and Sputnik 1 is now done as well. There we go. Get that put into the notepad. That means that we earned 750,000. Again, the cash constraints aren't really the big constraint here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I should have thought about this. This is going to require 50. Okay, so this is going to be at what? 948. Yeah, that's what that's going to be at. So I'll just spam this until we reach 948, and that will be correct. We get a lot of money for that. But, I mean, that's kind of what Sputnik did, right? It triggered the space race, and funding ballooned after that. Beautiful. So let's head on back to the Space Center, and let's think about what we need to do next. What are our next steps? This was Sputnik 1. The next step is Vostok 1, placing a Soviet Kerbal in orbit, completing 1 orbit. So we do need to get ourselves... Do we want to, like, separate out our Kerbals into, like, Soviet and American Kerbals, or do we just want to reuse them? I think it's fine to just reuse them, personally. We'd have to upgrade this a bunch, and yeah, that's a whole thing. I think for right now, what we should do is we should upgrade our launch pad with that successful launch, and we should update our VAB and our tracking station. Anything else that really needs to be upgraded? I mean, R&D is pretty expensive. We'll hold off on that for right now, but just getting those 3 upgraded will help us a lot. Actually, we're going to need to update our mission control as well, because that's what will allow us flight planning. Beyond that, we don't care about the max active contracts, so we never actually have to upgrade our mission control further. But that should be absolutely great. In terms of science, we're only at 23.4. What can we get? We could get general rocketry, allowing us access to the Reliant, as well as hemispherical liquid fuel tanks. T-200s would be pretty good. But honestly, I think that the AVT-1 winglets would be nice, but the Vostok launcher... I'd have to take a look at what the Vostok launcher actually ends up looking like so that we can plan that. So let me take a look here. Vostok 1, what do we have? So the actual launch vehicle, it's in here somewhere. Yeah, that's the space capsule. I'm looking for the actual vehicle. Okay, so that's, you know, very Soviet, like, oh, this is very blurry. Okay, fantastic. Well, I found this photo of it. That is very blurry indeed. This is not, I mean, they've got these strap-on boosters. We're not really able at this point technologically to get this like tapered shape to them. That is something we'll be able to do later, but that's not something that we can really do right now. So that's going to be what we're going to be angling to do. Here's a, looks like a high resolution modern recreation perhaps of the rocket. So we can work based off of this. It's not going to be perfect, but we can definitely see that they've got the strap-on boosters here, and these would probably decouple into the Korolev cross or something very similar to it. So that's going to be what we're going to be going for. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but what that does end up meaning is that we absolutely do need to get access to radial decouplers, and aerodynamic nose cones would be nice as well. I would love to get hemispherical liquid fuel tanks. Since we can't do the tapering in, we'll have to have some form of a nose cone on there. But unfortunately, right now, we can't do that. We'll have to wait until after Vostok 1 to do that, I'm willing to bet. So, we have a little bit of time left in this episode, so we could start thinking about what the Vostok 1 launcher would look like. I'm actually a little bit surprised that we finished Sputnik when we did, but let's create ourselves a new craft. We're going to be basing this on the Orion reentry module, I believe. The Vostok does have a fairing on it. But yeah, this is going to be based on, it looks like they've got a bit of a trunk section on there. Okay. We should probably have this. These are the only options. Okay, it's really more metallic in reality, but that's fine. I'm just looking at what the actual spacecraft looked like, and apparently it looked like this. So I'm looking at this like trunk section here. They've got the capsule up over this way, right? There's all that going on. So we could have this be our Orion reentry module. They've got a trunk here with these rockets, which are not retro rockets. They're actually facing this direction. Okay, I don't know that we have the tech to pull that off immediately. We might have to do that in a later update to the craft. Yeah, we're going to have to go with T-100s for right now. But that's okay. They were really more like gray and orange. And then we would just go with like a pug. So it would be something like this. In reality, we'd want to change this to be something like a single tank and then a bay down here probably. Like this would end up being like a service bay. Actually, yeah, let's do that. Let's make this a service bay right now. So it'll be something kind of like this, or maybe even like this. Now we'd want a decoupler here. This has built-in ablation, so I'm not going to put a heat shield on here actually. And then we'd have it be something kind of like this. We can't really change the coloration of this, sadly. But inside of this bay, we can put our scientific equipment. And we would definitely want to put in a radial science. A science junior is just too big. I think we can't fit a science junior in here, but we can put in a press mat barometer. I'm going to put an experiment storage unit up here. And I'm going to put in a 2-hot thermometer here. There we go. And then we'll put in a mystery goo containment unit. And is that all we have for good scientific experiments right now? Yes, that is. Actually, the experiment storage unit is not useful because a fun fact about the Vostok flights, the craft did not soft land. The pilot bailed out and parachuted to safety. So the spacecraft is basically just like this. So we would definitely need some form of antenna on it. And it looks like the antenna pretty much just comes right out the top based on my read of what that looks like. So something like this. So we would just transmit the data that we collect from here back, and then we bring this down, and then we'd bail out and parachute down would be the way that that ends up going. It's kind of insane, but yeah. As far as the actual Vostok itself goes, we're not quite ready to get that designed because it is time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to call this Vostok 1. And we'll get the actual launcher craft designed in the next episode. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Shadow Wolf, Andy McGar, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.